Would you dare to live in a place where even a single breath becomes a challenge? A place where physical pain is carved into art, where so-called coffin boxes represent a person's entire life savings, or where forbidden islands and ghost towns carry haunting traces of the past. The vast world has always hidden breathtaking contradictions, from harsh urban areas to abandoned lands and some of the strangest, most isolated tribes on the planet. All challenging the limits of human survival. Do not take your eyes off the screen, because the most astonishing hidden corners of the planet are about to be revealed right after this. Mursi Tribe, Ethiopia. Deep in the wild and isolated Omo River Valley of southwestern Ethiopia, the Mursi tribe has long become one of the most astonishing cultural mysteries to the modern world. They challenge every conventional standard of beauty with a highly symbolic and unusual tradition, stretching the lower lip with enormous clay or wooden plates. When a girl reaches the age of 15 or 16, the symbol of adulthood begins with a painful cut in the lower lip, followed by the removal of several front teeth to make room for the first small plate. Over time, the size of the plate gradually increases in proportion to self-esteem, pride, and even the bride price that the girl's family receives when she gets married. But if we look at the Mursi only through the lens of curiosity or sensational travel photographs, we will miss a cultural identity with deep human meaning. Behind the heavy lip plates and the practice of cutting the skin to create raised scar patterns on the chest and arms of both men and women is a strict mechanism of survival. In the past, these cuts and lip plates once served as a shield to protect Mursi women from slave traders, making them appear less attractive in the eyes of outsiders. Exploring the Mursi tribe is not simply witnessing a strange tradition, but a deep dive into the mindset of a people who see physical pain as a living work of art, using it to assert. Navotas. Navotas City lies in the northern part of Metro Manila, Philippines, and is known as a coastal city, closely tied to fishing, seaports, and crowded residential neighborhoods packed tightly together. Here, thousands of families have to live in cramped, damp, and challenging slum areas. Life here is not easy, especially when storms, high tides, or flooding occur. Walking through the alleys of Navotas, people can clearly feel the contrast between fierce vitality and harsh living conditions. Small houses stand close to the water's edge, with old tin roofs, narrow walkways barely wide enough for one person to pass, tangled electrical wires overhead, and underneath them, wastewater, trash, and the fishy smell of the sea, mixed with the fish market. Every inch of land is used, and every small corner has someone living, selling something, or repairing something. Yet Navotas is not only an image of poverty. This place also has the laughter of children, mothers preparing meals in front of their homes, men returning after fishing trips, and faces that have become all too familiar with having to struggle day after day. It is exactly that resilience that makes the residential areas of Navotas special. Congo Rainforest. I stepped into the Congo Rainforest when the sunlight could barely pass through the canopy anymore. The air was so humid that my clothes clung tightly to my skin after only a few steps. Deep inside these ancient forests is the home of the pygmy communities, people with small physical stature, but carrying within them a resilient life force that has endured for thousands of years. I met them in a temporary shelter area built from branches and banana leaves, each hut so small that I had to lower my head just to get inside. The men carry bows and arrows to hunt from the early morning, crossing swampy areas filled with crocodiles and venomous snakes. The women stay behind to keep the fire burning, because to them, if the kitchen fire goes out, it is a bad omen. Their meal is sometimes only roasted insects, wild honey, and roots dug from the soil. I looked into the eyes of a child sitting beside the fire and saw there a kind of resilience that city life could never have. People living along the river told me about Kongamato, a giant flying creature with smooth, leathery wings, often said to appear along quiet stretches of river. They call it the boat capsizer, and many people still carefully carry protective charms when crossing the river. Deeper still, among the Virunga volcanic mountains, there is a legend about the lost ancient city of Zinj. People whisper that its stone walls still lie somewhere beneath the moss, waiting for the day they are found. Kompong Khleang. If there is any place where people must live according to the temper of the water, it is Kompong Khleang, the largest floating village on Tonle Sap Lake. Here, there is an extremely strange phenomenon. The river flows backward. Every rainy season, water from the Mekong River pours into the lake with such force that it turns dirt roads into canals as deep as 46 feet, submerging the entire landscape in a sea of water. To adapt, the residents here have built towering stilt houses covered in bright layers of colorful paint. During the dry season, the village appears with tall wooden posts rising upward like thin, bony legs standing unsteadily. But when the flood season arrives, the water rises close to the floors of the houses, turning the entire life of more than 6,000 people into a world floating on the waves. That rhythm of life becomes most lively around October, when the Bonhomme Took Water Festival takes place. At this time, people from everywhere gather to watch boat races and perform flower offering rituals at pagodas to thank the river for giving them an abundant supply of fish and shrimp. Although life is still full of difficulties, the large families here still keep a surprisingly simple, sincere, and hospitable character. Sitting on a small boat at sunset, enjoying fragrant amak fish rich with the taste of coconut milk, you will see that Kompong Khleang is not just a village, but proof of how human beings can rely on nature to write a peaceful and radiant life. Hashima Island. Hashima Island was once one of the most densely populated places on the planet, but today it is only a cold, abandoned block of concrete drifting off the coast of Japan. The story began in 1887, when the first coal mine was opened on this small island. Later, Mitsubishi purchased the entire mining area and turned Hashima into a profitable industrial center. Workers and their families arrived in growing numbers, quickly turning the tiny island into a miniature city in the middle of the sea. By the 1950s, about 5,200 people were living packed together in an area of less than 0.4 square miles. Apartment buildings, schools, stores, barbershops, and even a swimming pool were built to serve daily life. But behind that development was a heavy past, especially during World War II, when many Korean and Chinese laborers were forced to work in the coal mines. In 1974, when Mitsubishi closed the mine, Hashima was almost drained of life within a short period of time. The residents left, leaving behind empty concrete buildings facing the sea wind. In 2015, Hashima was recognized by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site, but this title came with many controversies because of its history of forced labor. Today, visitors can take a tour to Hashima Island for about $30 to $75, depending on the type of ticket. Tuiwa Village. Tuiwa Village sits at an altitude of about 16,634 feet on the cold Tibetan Plateau, where people seem to live closer to the sky than to the ground. At this altitude, the air is so thin that every breath becomes heavier than usual. For people coming from the lowlands, just a few quick steps can make the heart pound, the head feel dizzy, and the body become exhausted. But for the people of Tuiwa, this is a familiar rhythm of life that they have been forced to endure for many generations. The village lies amid an open mountain landscape with strong winds, harsh sunlight during the day, and biting cold when night falls. The land is dry and barren, the growing season is short, and both farming and livestock raising depend heavily on unforgiving weather. Here, a meal, a source of clean water, or a calm day without strong wind can become something truly precious. Life in Tuiwa is not glamorous like the travel photos of Tibet. It is the quiet adaptation of human beings to low air pressure, cold climate, and the isolation of high mountains. These harsh living conditions are exactly what make the average life expectancy of the people here much lower. But that is also what makes Tuiwa special. It is proof of the extraordinary ability of human beings to hold on in a place that nearly touches the limits of survival. Mali. The Bandiagara escarpment appeared in the afternoon sun, casting an orange-red glow over the towering cliffs. The Dogon people have lived along these cliffs for many centuries, building homes right on narrow stone ledges where even one wrong step could cost a life. They chose to inherit this place, where their ancestors once had to flee from wars and came to the cliffs as a final refuge. The dry season here lasts so long that the ground cracks into deep grooves, with not a single drop of water left behind. I watched a woman carrying a water jar on her head, climbing across steep stone steps for hours just to bring back a few liters of water for her entire family. Even children here learn how to climb before they learn how to walk steadily. I met an old man sitting in front of his house, weaving baskets, and he told me that every time the rainy season comes, they must store every grain of millet and every drop of water, because no one knows how much longer the next dry season will last. His eyes were tired, yet also so determined that I could never forget them. The Taguna, the low-roofed shelter of the Dogon at the center of the village, is where men gather to discuss important matters. The roof is deliberately built so low that no one can stand upright. When an argument becomes tense, anyone trying to stand up will hit his head on the roof and be forced to sit back down. It is this fascinating architecture that has trained people to remain calm. One more distinctive feature of this region, on the sandy ground, are the stars revolving around Sirius, which the ancient Dogon discovered, surpassing even today's scientists. La Rinconada. La Rinconada lies in the Andes of Peru, at an altitude of about 17,060 feet above sea level. It is considered the highest permanent settlement on Earth, where people live right below freezing glaciers, in air so thin that every breath becomes a challenge. Yet tens of thousands of people still come here for one single reason: gold. Beneath the icy mountains are gold mines that have kept the entire town alive. But the dream of changing one's life in La Rinconada does not shine as brightly as the metal they dig from the earth. Many miners work for 30 days without pay, only to receive one day when they are allowed to mine for themselves. That day may bring luck, but it may also bring nothing at all. Life in this town is also extremely harsh. The lack of oxygen makes newcomers easily suffer from headaches, nausea, and exhaustion. Water sources around the area are polluted by gold mining and mercury use. Trash, mud, noise, crime, and unsafe tunnels make La Rinconada feel like a chaotic frontier. Yet people still hold on here. Amid ice, poverty, and danger, La Rinconada reveals a cold truth. Sometimes, in order to search for a chance at survival, human beings must step into places that almost seem unfit for life. If you had to live in La Rinconada for 30 days in exchange for a chance to become rich, would you dare to try? Leave a comment below. Mesa Verde. In the state of Colorado, United States, Mesa Verde preserves the strange stone structures of the ancestral Puebloans. They did not build their villages on the plains, but created entire communities inside rock alcoves set deep beneath canyon cliffs. Today, more than 600 cliff dwellings are still recorded at Mesa Verde. Some are only small clusters of homes, but there are also massive complexes with about 200 rooms, built from sandstone, wood, and mortar made of mud. For many generations, thousands of people lived here. Every day, they had to climb wooden ladders, cling to narrow vertical paths, and carry water, food, and supplies into homes that always remained within the dim light of the cliff walls. What is strange is that after centuries of building and adapting, that community left in the 13th century. Long-lasting drought, exhausted land, and increasingly scarce resources may have forced them to leave behind the stone cities that had once been their safest shelter. Mesa Verde therefore became a stone ghost town, silent in the shadows for hundreds of years. When it was rediscovered, this place astonished people not only because of its architecture, but also because of the haunting feeling of a civilization that once lived so close to the sky, then disappeared from the cliffs as if it had never existed. Snake Island, Brazil. There is an island where no one is allowed to set foot without a special permit. At first glance, it looks strangely peaceful, with grey cliffs covered in green moss and dense forest. But the truth lies beneath the layer of dry leaves. Thousands of golden lancehead pit vipers, a snake species with venom so powerful that a single bite can cause human tissue to deteriorate in an instant. What is especially striking is that this snake, after living on the island, evolved into a far more dangerous form, with venom believed to be 5 times more destructive than that of ordinary golden lancehead pit vipers. No one dares to live here, except for the brave lighthouse keepers on the island and their families. Fishermen from the São Paulo region tell a haunting story about a lighthouse keeper's family from long ago. One night, snakes crawled through the window gaps into the house, and the whole family had to flee outside into the darkness. Sadly, none of them survived until the next morning. Since then, the lighthouse has only been operated by machines, with experienced specialists sent there each year. I looked at the light, blinking steadily in the evening mist, and felt an indescribable sadness for those who lost their lives just to keep that light from going out. Coastal fishermen tell a completely different story. The snakes on the island were once released by pirates to protect a mysterious treasure buried deep in the forest. No one knows whether this is true or not, but the story has been passed down through many generations, making not a single fisherman dare to come close to fish. On calm nights at sea, people hear strange sounds echoing from the island. It is the sound of thousands of snakes sliding through dry leaves at the same time, savage and haunting, like the scythe of death, waiting to take the life of anyone who dares to violate its territory. Coffin Homes, behind the dazzling glow of Hong Kong's glittering skyscrapers, lies a suffocating dark side that few dare to look at directly. The lives of hundreds of thousands of people inside coffin apartments. In one of the most expensive cities in the world, coffin homes, or cage homes, are a cruel reality, where old apartments of about 430 square feet are divided into 20 to 30 box units, with an area of only about 15 square feet to 43 square feet. Tenants have to crawl inside, unable to stand upright, and can only sleep curled up with all the belongings of an entire lifetime packed into one tiny space. A few sets of clothes, a rice cooker, and a small corner holding personal keepsakes. It is hard to believe that these cramped, windowless spaces can be home to an entire family, where they must share a damp bathroom and kitchen. The smell of sweat, the smell of food, the sound of snoring, and even the sound of sighs all blend together, creating an atmosphere so stifling that it becomes oppressive. The paradox is that the rent for these boxes can reach $200 to $500 per month, an unreasonable amount, yet the only choice for about 200,000 poor workers and elderly people living alone amid the housing crisis in Hong Kong. Looking at that human picture, what moves me the most is not poverty, but the way they face adversity. In a confined space that seems capable of suffocating every bit of hope, human dignity still shines with quiet resilience. They still keep the habit of making tea every morning, still read the newspaper, and still smile when greeting the neighbor on the other side of a thin wall. That quiet patience and kindness is the most moving story about the instinct to survive, reminding us of the haunting hidden corners right beneath the feet of monuments of luxury. Longyearbyen. I arrived in Longyearbyen on an afternoon when the sun did not set at all. This is one of the northernmost towns on the planet, where the cold seeps into every wooden fiber of the brightly painted houses, as if people are trying to add a little color to a land covered in white all year round. People here live by strange rules. Anyone who steps outside the town must carry a rifle, because polar bears can appear and attack at any time. Winter lasts for several months in complete darkness, with the sun never rising. When summer arrives, the light never goes out, making sleep a kind of luxury that the people living here must train themselves to manage. I met a woman working at a coffee shop, and she said that when someone becomes seriously ill, they must fly back to the mainland because the ground is frozen year-round and does not allow burials here. Hearing her words, I felt a very different kind of loneliness, or more precisely, the extreme isolation of this land. There is a story passed from person to person that on the nights when the aurora is at its greenest, the lights dancing across the sky are the souls of miners from long ago, still quietly guarding this frozen land. Naica Crystal Cave, standing in the Chihuahua Desert, where the sun burns so fiercely that the air seems to ripple in waves, made me understand what it truly means to test human endurance. At the foot of Naica Mountain is a small town where generations of miners have risked their lives in deep underground tunnels. They wake up before dawn, carrying water bottles and old flashlights, then disappear into the earth for hours at a time. When they come back up, their shirts are soaked as if they have just stepped out of a river. An old miner told me that down there, the air is so thick that the lungs feel as if they are breathing in scalding hot steam. Many people have unfortunately developed respiratory diseases, and some have never returned after a shift, and yet they still face it day after day, because it is the only way to support their families in this barren land. I looked into his eyes, and that weary, weathered gaze made it hard for me to hold back a deep sense of sympathy. People living around Naica Mountain say that the giant crystals below are the shape of a god's tears, shed in sorrow for this dry and barren land. Each teardrop fell into the earth over millions of years, forming crystal columns as tall as ancient tree trunks. The old miner lowered his voice and told me that on some nights he hears a humming sound echoing up from inside the mountain. Perhaps it is the sound of the gods still weeping for the lives of the people forced to endure the harsh punishment of nature in this land. Aogashima. About 222 miles south of Tokyo, Aogashima is the smallest village in Japan, nestled inside a giant volcanic crater with a rare mountain within a mountain structure. This lush tropical beauty once carried a terrifying memory in 1780, when a volcanic eruption wiped out half the population, leaving the island abandoned for half a century before people bravely returned to settle there. The cultural depth of Aogashima lies not only in the way people use geothermal heat for steam baths or free cooking, but also in the consciousness of farewell. Because of harsh conditions and limited educational resources, every child on the island must leave their family and go to the mainland when they turn 15. Most of the folk songs here are thoughtful farewell songs, echoing through the thick fog that often isolates the island from the world. With only about 200 residents, life on Aogashima is an intersection of courage and stillness. They accept living on the mouth of a giant that is still active, using helicopters as their only bridge to reality. Exploring Aogashima is witnessing the power of one's roots, a place where people, even while facing danger and loneliness, still persist in staying behind to keep the flame of their ancestral land alive. Wadi Halfa, Sudan. I arrived in Wadi Halfa at noon when the sun hung overhead like a giant ball of fire. The town lies on the edge of the Nubian Desert, known as one of the driest lands on the planet, where some years pass without a single drop of rain. Sand covers everything, from the thresholds of homes to cups of tea that have not even been finished yet. People here are used to waking up and finding half of their house buried in sand after a night of strong wind. I met a man sweeping sand away from his doorway. He smiled when he saw my surprise and said it was a familiar daily task. In this place, sandstorms can arrive suddenly, turning daytime into night in just a few minutes and bringing the entire town to a complete stop. Drinking water here is even more precious than gold. People walk for miles just to carry back a few containers of cloudy water from the Nile River. I watched a child share the last cup of water with a younger sibling, with eyes so calm that I felt completely distant from the idea of true scarcity. The Nubian people here told me about their old town, which once stood in a different location, but was completely submerged beneath Lake Nasser when the hydroelectric dam was built in the 1960s. An entire homeland with ancient temples, lush date palm gardens, and ancestral graves disappeared forever beneath the water, and they had to begin life all over again on this barren land. Heard Island. Although it belongs to Australian territory, Heard Island lies extremely far from the mainland, in the cold waters of the southern Indian Ocean. This is one of the most remote, harshest, and hardest to reach islands on Earth. The island is home to Mawson Peak, a volcanic summit about 9,006 feet high, and also the highest mountain in Australian territory. If most of Australia brings to mind heat, deserts, and dry landscapes, Herd is a completely different world. This place is covered with snow, ice, glaciers, strong winds, and rough seas, like a lonely white fortress in the middle of the ocean. What makes Herd Island especially unusual is that it has almost no permanent residents. No towns, no airport, no ordinary tourists. Only a few scientific research teams are allowed to set foot here under very strict conditions. That isolation is exactly what makes Herd a rare natural laboratory. Scientists can observe volcanoes, glaciers, seabirds, seals, and signs of climate change in an environment that has been almost untouched by human disturbance. Thanks to protection regulations over the past half-century, the number of expeditions to this island group has even been fewer than the number of missions sent to the moon. Mentawai Islands, Indonesia. The Mentawai Islands lie off the western coast of Sumatra, Indonesia. This is a place that still preserves many very ancient ways of life, especially on Sable Island, where dense forests cover the land, rivers weave through the landscape, and many indigenous communities still live almost separated from the modern world. The Mentawai people live in traditional stilt houses called uma. The houses are built from bamboo, wood, and grass, with the skulls of animals they have hunted hanging inside. Like prehistoric people, they grow their hair long, wear loincloths, and decorate their heads with flowers and ornaments. Their daily life is tied to the forest, rivers, and sea. They hunt, fish, gather medicinal plants, and believe that everything around them has a spirit, listening to nature as if listening to a family member. And they believe that if human beings live wrongly toward nature, they will all have to suffer serious consequences. The traditional food of the Mentawai people is grubs from rotting wood in the forests of Siberut, considered by local people to be a valuable source of protein, with a rich, fatty taste and often eaten raw or grilled. The most prominent figures in Mentawai are the Sikirai healers. When healing illness, they do not only use leaves or forest roots, but also perform rituals, songs, and beliefs to connect human beings with the invisible world. Here, tooth sharpening and tattooing are not only for beauty, but also reflect a belief in harmony with the spirits of the forest. The Mentawai people believe that the sharper a woman's teeth are, the more beautiful she is, and the man whose wife has the sharpest teeth has a higher status in the tribe. Mentawai is not an ordinary tourist destination. It is like a land that still preserves one of the extremely wild remaining ways of life of humanity. Guoliang Village, China. Guoliang Village sits precariously on top of the Taihang Mountains, isolated from the outside world for many centuries. The villagers could only climb up by using tiny stone steps carved into the vertical cliff face. I followed the tunnel road cut deep into the cliff wall, where each window opened onto a dizzying drop below that made my heart tighten. I met an old man sitting in front of his house smoking, his hands covered with calluses and scars. He said that in the 1970s, the villagers decided to carve a road through the cliff by themselves. They had only hammers, chisels, and their bare hands. It took more than 5 years. Day after day, the men in the village took turns hanging from ropes, striking the hard rock one hammer blow at a time. Among them were a few who would never return to their families. But without that road, a seriously ill person in the middle of the night would almost have no chance of being saved, because getting down to the foot of the mountain took nearly a full day on foot. I looked at the old man's weathered hands and understood that these roads were built with blood and perseverance that no amount of money could buy. The name Guoliang of this land was given after an ancient hero who led the people to flee up into the mountains to escape a brutal court. They believe his spirit still lingers around the mountaintop, quietly protecting the peace of the entire village. Idanre. Hidden among the majestic limestone peaks of Ondo State, Idanre appears like a mysterious sacred land covered in a misty veil all year round. To reach the heart of this place, you must overcome the challenge of 679 steep stone steps, the only path connecting the modern world at the foot of the mountain with a historical space that has existed for centuries. This is not only a geographical location. Idanre is the embodiment of the resilience and deep pride of the Yoruba people. The cultural depth of Idanre lies in the close connection between human beings and the rugged terrain. In the past, these giant rock formations, hundreds of yards high, once served as a strong natural fortress, protecting the people from civil wars and invasions. At the top of the hill, the remains of the ancient palace, the first school, and the court of the kings still stand, telling the story of a well-organized society with a powerful sense of dignity. The people here see the hills not merely as rocks, but as sacred guardians, the dwelling place of deities expressed through mysterious carvings. Exploring Idanre is a journey back to the roots, where each step on the stone stairs takes you farther away from the noise of the world and closer to the echo of history. It is powerful proof that when human beings know how to rely on nature and faith, they can build an undying kingdom right among the clouds. Pravčická Brána, Czech Republic. I followed the slope down to the small village nestled at the foot of the cliff, where the Elbe River quietly flows toward the northern border. The village has only a few dozen rooftops, their red tiles faded by many seasons of frost. Winter here lasts so harshly that the locals joke they have only two seasons, the cold season and the season of preparing for the cold. I met an old woman drying firewood on her porch, her calloused hands rough like tree bark. She said that when she was little, there were months when her family struggled so much that they ate only boiled potatoes with a pinch of salt, and even the road out of the village was often blocked by snow. Every time floodwaters came down from upstream, the water rose as high as the second floor, and they had rebuilt their house countless times with their own hands. I stood in the middle of the village, listening to the wind whistle through the mountain gaps, feeling as if the entire village was holding its breath, waiting and praying for each day to pass in peace. The guide stopped beneath the stone arch and told me the story of a knight named Pravčická, who entered this forest in the Middle Ages to face the darkness threatening the villagers. When everything was over, the knight turned into stone, stretching himself into a giant arch to guard the land below forever. The people believe that as long as the stone arch remains standing, peace will be preserved. Pitcairn Island. In the vast South Pacific Ocean, there is an island so small that when looking at a map, many people almost miss it. That is Pitcairn, a lonely volcanic piece of land located far away from familiar shipping routes and the crowded cities of the world. What makes Pitcairn special is not only its remote location, but also the strange story behind the tiny community here. In 1790, 9 mutineers from the HMS Bounty, together with a group of Polynesian people, came to this island to escape pursuit by the British Navy. After reaching shore, they burned the very ship that had brought them here, both to erase their traces and to cut off the path back to the old world. From that escape, a new community gradually formed. Today, the island's population is only about 50 people, most of them carrying the bloodline of the mutineers from long ago. Life on Pitcairn is unlike anywhere else. There is no airport, no crowded city, and no busy streams of traffic. All important supplies depend on supply ships, which visit the island only a few times each year. If a ship is missed, the residents may have to wait for many months in the middle of the vast ocean. It is exactly this isolation that makes Pitcairn feel both like a forgotten place and like a hidden paradise at the very edge of the earth. Niihau Island. Niihau is not only the seventh largest island of Hawaii, it is a private kingdom, completely separated from the world. In 1864, Elizabeth Sinclair purchased this place for $110,000, equivalent to about $17 million today. For more than 160 years, the Robinson family has kept its promise to preserve the island, creating one of the strangest political arrangements in the world. Outsiders are strictly forbidden. No hotels, no restaurants, and the only way for you to admire this jewel is to see it from a helicopter at a distant and regretful range. On Niihau, time seems to stand still. About 170 residents live in a society with no motor vehicles and no urban noise. They travel by horse and rely entirely on solar power. This is a rare, self-sufficient paradise. Residents pay no rent, meat is provided for free, and the main language is traditional Hawaiian. Although there is a small U.S. Navy facility, the island still maintains an almost absolute purity. Niihau is not only a forbidden island, it is a symbol of steadfastness. While the whole world races toward industrialization, the people here choose to slow down, preserve the craft of making rare shell lays, and protect the spirit of their ancestors. Tristan da Cunha. If one had to choose a place that feels like the end of the world, it would be Tristan da Cunha. This small island lies in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean, belongs to a British overseas territory, and is considered the most remote permanently inhabited island group on Earth. There are only more than 200 residents on the island, most of them descendants of families who settled there in the 19th century. Surrounding them is the vast ocean on every side. Life here depends on fishing, livestock raising, self-sufficient farming, and rare supply ships. Tristan da Cunha has no airport. There are no flights in and no flights out. To set foot on the island, people must travel by ship from Cape Town, crossing rough seas for about 6 days each way. Therefore, in medical situations that exceed the ability to treat locally, residents sometimes have to wait for a ship to be evacuated. What is special is that on the island, almost everyone you meet may be a distant or close relative. Land is not privately owned, but belongs to the community, whoever they are. When living on Tristan da Cunha, they are all equal before the land beneath their feet. Every year, during the potato planting or harvesting season, the whole island goes out to the fields together. Other work temporarily stops, and everyone works together, shares together, and helps preserve the food source that sustains the community. In the most isolated place on the planet, human beings do not survive through competition. They survive by relying on one another. Sable Island. In the cold Atlantic Ocean, off the coast of Canada, there is a crescent-shaped sand island called Sable Island. On the map, it looks as fragile as a streak of sand drifting in the sea, yet it is one of the most dangerous places for ships. Sable Island lies in an area known as the Graveyard of the Atlantic. Thick fog, strong ocean currents, powerful storms, and constantly shifting sandbars have caused hundreds of ships to run aground or sink around the island. For this reason, it was once a haunting fear for sailors crossing the North Atlantic. What is strange is that on this harsh island, a herd of wild horses lives there. They wander among sand dunes, wild grass, and sea winds, becoming the most famous symbol of Sable Island. Apart from that, the island has almost no permanent residents, only a few research, conservation, or weather staff working there at certain times. Sable Island, therefore, carries a beauty that is both lonely and frightening. A small island, yet powerful enough to become an obsession of the entire Atlantic. Colima. When arriving in Colima, Mexico, anyone can easily be won over by its shady rows of trees, deep blue coastline, and ancient architecture nestled beneath a majestic volcano. Yet behind that paradise beauty lies a troubling reality of urban security, turning this place into one of the most challenging lands to live in the world. Based on statistics from 2022, Colima faced a record high level of insecurity among cities with more than 300,000 residents. This instability comes from long-running power conflicts between local organizations, creating a stressful living environment for local residents. Compared with other major cities already notorious for danger, the numbers in Colima still left observers shocked by how complex the situation had become. The depth of Colima's story does not lie in the darkness of numbers, but in the spirit of the people here. It is the resilience of a community that continues to hold on every day, trying to maintain its rhythm of life and cultural beauty amid the changes of the times. Exploring Colima is about understanding a heartbreaking paradox, a place where nature has given almost everything beautiful, yet people still have to struggle day by day to reclaim the peace that should have belonged to them. Pripyat, Ukraine. Pripyat was once a modern city built to serve the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, where tens of thousands of people lived, worked, and dreamed of a bright future. But all that hope was destroyed on a spring night in 1986. when a silent disaster turned this place into something human beings could never have imagined. The people who once lived here had to leave within just a few hours, carrying only a few sets of clothes. They once believed they would be able to return in a few days, but the doors of their homes never opened again. I walked past apartments where dolls still lay on beds, textbooks remained open on desks, and cups of tea had dried up long ago. Even more astonishingly, a small number of elderly people quietly returned, living illegally in their old homes. I met an old woman tending her small garden, and she said she would rather die on the land of her ancestors than live far from her homeland. Her eyes were so calm that I did not dare ask anything more. People around the exclusion zone told me about the giant Ferris wheel, in the amusement park, built to open during the Labor Day holiday that year, but not a single child ever got to ride it. They believe that on cold, windy nights, the Ferris wheel still turns slightly by itself, as if waiting for the laughter of children who will never come. Namche Bazaar. Perched at an altitude of 11,286 feet, Namche Bazaar is where the air begins to grow so thin that every step becomes a battle for oxygen. This is not just a village, but the final fortress of human beings before facing the brutality of the death zone in the Himalayas. Harshness exists in every rhythm of life. Every brick, grain of rice, or piece of medical equipment here must be paid for with the sweat and blood of the Sherpa people and yak caravans, crossing dangerous mountain passes suspended among the clouds. In Namche, the comfort of cafes or bakeries is only a thin shell hiding the reality of a land where nature can take life at any moment with snowstorms or bone-deep cold. Life here is an epic of endurance. The people do not merely live, they conquer altitude every single day. Namche Bazaar reminds us that to survive halfway up the sky, human beings must possess a will of iron stronger than even the limestone peaks surrounding them.